The following is a sponsored episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am so excited to have my dear friend, Nata Salvatori, joining us again. Nata is a freedom first leadership and scaling coach and host of the Accidental CEO podcast. With a doctorate and a decade in psychology driven healthcare systems, Nata helps high capacity founders exit over responsibility, redesign their role, and install structures that scale without sacrificing their lives. Through her R.E.T.U.R.N, R-E.T.U.R.N framework, leaders reclaim their time, distribute ownership, and sustain performance with clarity and calm. Her mantra is high standards, human pace. And seriously, she is one of the smartest people I know. I love brainstorming with her. Nata, I'm so happy to have you back.
You're too sweet. You know a lot of smart people, so I will not take that lightly. Thank you so much.
No, it really is true. And speaking of, if you haven't heard Nada's previous episode on our show, I'll link it below. I highly recommend adding to your queue right after this one. It's such a great case study on a really creative way to market a service-based offer. I'll just give you a hint. It's like live Instagram auction. If you are intrigued, you got to give it a listen. But anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today is really more about your own capacity as a high achieving woman and the invisible load that many of us carry. So Nada's going to share with us why success can really still feel fragile behind the scenes and how to build a business that doesn't depend on you. So I would say, Nada, my first thought here is what is the difference between a founder who is successful on paper versus someone who's running a business that's actually sustainable?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's not as easy to spot as you might think. So that successful founder has the revenue, they have the clients, they have the results. Everything looks good at face value. But if you look a little bit closer, if you pull the curtains and take a look behind the scenes, the business still runs on you. Every decision, every approval, every strategy, like everything at the end of the day threads back to you as the business owner, as the CEO, as the founder of the company. And, everything lives in your head. All the systems, all the standards. And if you're not present in every decision at all times, then nobody knows where to go. Things don't get done. But at the end of the day, at face value, everything looks fine, right? The business is making money. Things are happening. Sustainability, though, looks very different than that. It means that that business can breathe without you. You can breathe. You can step away and take that vacation that you've been planning for so long without everything falling apart. Not because you're just like, I'm done, I'm not involved anymore, but because you actually build something that doesn't require you to be the answer for everything. And I mean, I've known this personally. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time, over 15 years of coaching, but my actual coaching business itself is relatively young. So there's a gap. There's this feeling of like things are not matching, right? So, and that feels heavy a lot of times. There's a tension in there, and my clients feel that too. So that experience, like your experience, you're capable and you've done so much, but there's still something that doesn't feel right. And usually that's where that sustainability is not present in your business.
That was such a clear, I feel like, breakdown side by side of the difference. And, one thing that really struck me that you just said, Nata, is it's not even so much about, I mean, yes, this is a huge component. I think a lot of people understand on a base level, like if you don't have work instructions or standard operating procedures or systems that, obviously people won't be able to execute on whatever task they're supposed to do when you're not actively involved. I think we have accepted that, but I think the piece that is more profound that you said is that second layer, which is even if you have maybe on a base level some sort of system in place that allows people to execute on the tasks that they've been assigned when you're away. The bigger piece is that if you're not actively guiding them and telling them like, hey, here's where we're moving in the next week or month, here are the things you should be aware of or proactively taking up, they don't do anything unless it's assigned to them directly. And so I think that layer is like where so many more people get tripped up. And I want to circle back to it in just a moment. But the other big thought that kind of came to mind as you were talking is it's really interesting when I just purchased an existing business. in February with my husband in a completely different industry, right? It's a retail shop. That was the very first time I ever entered into a business that I own where I knew truly the least of everybody there. Like day one, when I walked in, I was like, I literally don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to work the register. I don't know how to buy the clothes. I don't know how to do anything operationally for this business. And it was a very humbling experience and also showed me, wow, this is what it can feel like to not feel like you have to be in control of everything because you actually don't have a choice because you don't know anything. So that was really interesting. And I just want to kind of get your take on people who have been so mired in their process for so long that don't have the luxury to, I guess, like experience that.
Mhm.
What would you say is like the first thing they should really be focused on trying to extract themselves from?
Yeah, what a blessing to have that experience, right? We don't get to do that and kind of feel the other side of things. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of times we think it's a strategy problem. It's an operational system related problem. And what I want to call your attention to is what I see more often than not is that we're trying to solve these strategic issues when that's really not the problem, right? What we're actually, at the end of the day, experiencing is an identity shift that needs to happen, that we have not been willing to put the time into it yet. Because I'm asking you to get out of this founder operator mindset and an identity. And I'm asking you to step out of that and into a CEO mentality and a CEO mindset. And a lot of times, founders cannot be CEOs because the skill set is different, the motivation is different, your grind is different, and where you put your time and effort and capacity into is different than what you will do when you become a true CEO. So people often look for, oh, I need to get this off my task, or I need to get this off my schedule. And what you actually need to do is stop and take some time to reflect and be really honest on what parts of the identity are holding you from taking a next step into becoming the new leader that your business needs to grow.
Ooh, that probably feels like a gut punch to some people because it's like a truth that's really hard to look in the face, right? But I'm so glad that you said that. If we're talking about that earlier point, then like once someone kind of does that identity work to be able to understand and remove themselves from how they've always kind of operated within their business, how do we solve that other problem of, okay, people know how to do their own tasks, but how do I create a team that's proactive and able to, even without my guidance, even in my absence, know what to do next to be able to anticipate the next thing without me?
Yeah, we have to remember that the standards and the guardrails and everything needs to live outside of our head. So that's a problem that we run into very often is we know everything. We know how things should work. We started this thing from the beginning by ourselves. We were wearing all the 17 hats, right? And we were the doers. But now other people need to understand, what did that look like, right? If you go on that 2-week vacation completely unplugged, everybody should know what tasks that they own, like what is the outcome that they own in relationship to what the company needs to accomplish at that time. You know, they don't need to come to you, they don't need to call you, they don't need to text you because the standards now no longer live in your head. You've taken the time to create the SOPs, the processes, the chain of command, the decision ladder, whatever you need to create so your team can have ownership and responsibility and feel empowered to make those decisions, you know, and sharing that load with the team, which is what is so hard for a lot of people sometimes to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That ownership of decisions, especially, I know is a huge challenge for people because it's easy to train someone how to do a task. It's much harder to
Yep.
trust their discernment when it comes to a decision. So I'm wondering, like, you obviously help founders with the structural piece, like, here's how to create systems, here's how to create processes. How do you work with people to navigate that identity piece, that piece that's much, much harder to actually, transform in?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is taking a time to stop and name what it is, right? Recognizing because it could be different things. One of the things that I run into very often is we actually, a lot of us find our self-worth connected to our work, right? So like I like being the one that solves all the problems. I like being the one that everybody goes to and counts on to solve the problems. So if out of the sudden I tell you, Ellen, you no longer get to do that, and you're like, okay, but where do I now find my self-worth as a leader, right? So that is not an easy thing to do. And what I want people to understand is that you can simultaneously want to be helped and want to have support and feel scared about it. That is normal. That is okay. What you don't need to do is just stay there, right? We need to find a way to create support that helps you feel comfortable. And when I do this identity part of the work, because my work is kind of an intersection of the operations and the systems and the identity work, I truly believe that you cannot do one without the other. I'm not saying you need years of therapy. That is not what I'm talking about. And yes, therapy is great and we should all do it. But what I'm talking about is there are just habit changes that need to happen. There is understanding what the problem is, making small changes that support you feel comfortable making those changes so you don't slip back into the old habits as soon as something feels a little uncomfortable. So it's just a practice of smaller habits that compound into creating this space where you feel different, you lead differently, but you feel supported and you feel like things are going to be okay now in this new state, right? Because you have the support, you created everything behind it. So it's different, it's not a person. I'm not talking about personality trait that you can change. I'm talking about very easy things to change if we just take the time to do what I call the hard work, because people are willing to work hard, but they're not willing to do the hard work of working through that identity shift. We are more likely to say, yeah, I'll just work a little bit harder. I'll push a little bit more into this. I'll get more leads. I'll put more money into marketing. But all I need to do sometimes is just stop and breathe and really take the time to hold a mirror and see, where is it that I am being the bottleneck because I'm not willing to change how I lead.
That is such a mic drop. People are willing to work hard, but they're not willing to do the hard work. Oh my gosh, that's so good. And I definitely want to circle back to this idea of stopping and pausing, because you've brought it up now multiple times within this conversation. But before I do that, I want to expand on that habit piece, because I thought it was really interesting how you explained that. Like, it's not just a mindset identity shift, but it comes out through our daily habits and actions, right? And so for a woman who is stuck in that performance mode in business, or any founder really, but I know this especially impacts women, for someone who's stuck in a situation like that, can you give a tangible example of like one specific habit that you've seen come up over and over again in your clients or even in yourself that you helped them change as part of that series of small habits that stack? Like, what's one of those early habits that you tend to tackle with your clients first?
Yeah, I think there's two really good ones that we can talk about. Number one is truly understanding how to delegate, right? So going through the whole process of doing a task audit, understanding what tasks you should be delegating, then how you're going to be delegating, who you're going to be delegating to, how you're going to follow up on that. What is the whole structure around delegation so you can actually do it in a way that creates successful outcomes and in a way that helps you feel comfortable doing it, because it's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning. It is not easy to let go of these things. One of my early businesses when I became an entrepreneur is a wedding company, a wedding photography company. Now, I built the whole business around me. I'm the brand. I'm the photographer. The venues knew me. The planners knew me. Out of the sudden, I need to build a team because I'm losing money. I'm leaving money on the table because I'm by myself and I'm having to turn a lot of people down. I realized I have to grow a team. Now, you're telling me I have to let somebody else go to that wedding under my business name and capture the most important day of somebody's life, and I just have to trust that they're gonna do a good job. Like, that is terrifying. So
Yeah.
I understand that. I've lived through it. So everything that I teach and go through with my clients, please understand, I've been there, I've done it, I totally get it. But there's, at some point, I need to make a choice between continuing to say no and being stuck, right, and hitting that ceiling of my business, or understanding that I can actually help more people and make more money if I just create a good structure around how I'm going to train people, how I'm going to help them understand what I expect, what are the standards, what are the guardrails. So practicing good structured delegation is a great way to start changing those habits. And then the other thing on more of the identity part is to start creating space on your calendar to have your CEO time, to practice sitting on that CEO chair and thinking about the future of your business, being the visionary, right? Having time to ideate, having time to maybe talk to other people who are there already, who had arrived where you were going to go, and start practicing the actions of being that CEO, right? So it's a combination, I think, of two things that are very important in the beginning that will be a great first step.
I love both of those examples. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that, again, that word of stop, pause, time, we hear that over and over again so far today. And I feel like this is a perfect intro into something that you've actually created to help people to force that time almost in a way when our schedules don't allow it or we're not allowing it, whatever it is. But you saw this pattern, right? That people aren't necessarily lacking that skill or even ambition to change. It's again, they just really lack the space, whether it's the time space or the physical space to be in a safe place and be in a high trust room to step out of that performance mode and really sit in that CEO seat, like you said, and make those hard decisions. So tell us a little bit about why you created CEO Confidential. Like, what is it and how does it help solve this issue of people not taking the time to pause and stop?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, because it is exactly why I created this. Because I kept watching these women, they sometimes recognize the right problem. They understand what needs to be done. And yet that shift doesn't happen, right? And then I realized that the missing piece wasn't more strategy, more knowledge, more hard work. It was a room. It's a very specific kind of room where they can actually step out of that performance mode and say, what is the real thing that is heavy out loud without managing how it's going to land the people listening, right? So you're not going out there and screaming to the world, yes, I have a successful business, but I am struggling, because a lot of times that's what's happening, and that there is no place to share that. So I created CEO Confidential, which is a 2-day closed door experience for that high performance founder who is scaling, but is carrying more than they should be. You're going to come in, you're going to name what's actually heavy, and then leave with some very clear priorities and a concrete plan. Ellie, know I'm a very tangible person, and I want you to leave with a plan to get this off your back, to be able to breathe, to be able to fall in love with that business again. And I wanted to be very clear about what it's not, right? Because I feel like it's easy to understand. It's not a retreat. It's not a mastermind. I will be taking care of you, because a lot of times we're the ones taking care of everything all the time. And I think it's good to give you that experience, to give back to you. But it's a working experience, because these women don't need more inspiration. They got it. They understand. They know what needs to be done. They actually need a plan. They need a room where they finally have the time to be honest, and they're allowed to be honest. And, it just meets everybody where they are. And I don't think there's a lot of places like that. So I want to create that space, because when we were in space long enough, we have to start performing. Like, the masks will fall, right? So I wanted to create that room, that space where everybody comes in, they feel good. It's protected, is very curated, is small, and it's for you to tackle that very specific problem.
I love that you're so clear on what it's not. I think that's what makes this so different and unique. And I just have to personally vouch for Nata. Like, one of the core things we originally bonded on was our need for specificity and tangibility, because both of us are immensely frustrated when we attend things and things don't feel tangible. So I can vouch that if Nata says, this is a working experience where you're going to come away with a concrete, tangible action plan to address the priorities that you need and to name the thing that's really been challenging you and holding you back, then that is what will be delivered. So I'm so excited for the women who will get to experience this. I don't think you mentioned where this is happening and when. And also, you did mention small room, but like, what are we talking about? Like, how many people will you be inviting into this experience?
Yes, my plan is to have 10 amazing, super strong, ready to be honest women in a room. And that's going to happen in September. And I am finalizing the location. So we have a wait list going on right now that if you're interested in any way of hearing more about it, we're going to share that on the show notes with you. I can tell you right now, there will be an application process. This is going to be a very curated experience. So I want to have the right people in a room where you feel like you're not coming in and just pouring into people and leaving with nothing. I want people to be there to be at the same level so they can help each other. And I want things to be very private and intentional. So we will reveal the details for the people on the wait list.
Amazing. Well, you know where to go then. To raise your hand and show your interest, make sure you check out the show notes for that. Let's go back to this idea of invisible load. We mentioned it at the beginning, Nata, and I would love to hear what you consider the invisible load. Like, what are these responsibilities that high achieving women carry that nobody else sees? And I have an inkling that some of these things kind of exist even outside of our business. So how would you define that invisible load?
Yeah, I'll give you a personal one first. So, like I said, I told the story growing my photography business. It was very hard to hire people in the beginning. The venues knew me, everybody trusted me. So, having to go through that process of letting go of the control, it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and they are ashamed of even saying that out loud because you sound just controlling. You're micromanaging, right? It's all you wanting to have all the control, and that word control is seen very negatively. When at the end of the day, you just want things to go well. You understand your reputation, and all the time you put into building this business is attached to your name, right? And now you're just putting it on somebody else's hand, and there's no way they're going to care as much as you do, right? And those are all the stories we tell ourselves. So we carry all that weight. So that's a very common one from more of a personal level, from being so attached to this business that we created, which is, again, completely normal, understandable. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel that way. That just means you're normal at the end of the day, right? It should be hard to hand this off to somebody else. And then at work, it shows up very often with, being the only person that holds every decision. You are the go-to for every approval. Even though you maybe delegated some of these tasks, they still need to come to you for final approval every single time. And I'm talking about maybe things that are not your huge needle movers. Maybe you're approving every single Canva design that go out, right? And that's the hill I'll die on. I love Canva designs. I can spend hours there. You need to let go and let somebody else do it. As long as they have the instructions and they understand what is the outcome, right? What is the picture of done look like? You gave the standards, you share that, pass that on. That does not need to be on your to-do list. So it's starting your day with intention of where your time is going to be put, where your capacity is going to be put at in your business. And, there's just so many things that we carry all the time that we don't need to be. So that's just a couple of examples there.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And, what's interesting is I think that when we think about getting support in any manner, whether it's support like I'm going to invest in the CEO Confidential and spend 2 days away to really come to grips with the decisions I need to make, or whether it's support in the sense of I'm going to hire a team member to take some things off my plate, to delegate effectively to. Oftentimes we associate that with a cost to us, right? Like, okay, we're going to make less because we have to pour money into this type of support. But I think there's also like a hidden cost to not doing it. Like, I think people only think about cost in this one direction when there's actually a cost in the other direction too. So what would you say is like the real cost or the hidden cost of remaining the sole glue of your company, whether that's from a personal perspective or operationally? Like, what's that cost look like?
Yeah, I can give you two perspectives. One is the hidden cost of what's going to happen to you personally. All the burnout we talk about all the time, right? You out of the sudden is going to start regretting creating this thing that you looked so much forward to. Like, you created this business to have this freedom, to have the ability to do all these things. And all of a sudden you find yourself being slave to it and being suffocated by this business that you created and falling out of love with it, right? So it's the whole burnout, is what it costs personally in your life, your inability to participate fully in your life because you're putting so many hours and so much effort into this. So I think that's one thing that we see very often. But then the other thing is there's also money cost that you're not thinking about. And I'll give you a little clear example here. If you ever took the time to understand your cost of doing business, which you should, and you know how much your time costs to the company every time that you are doing a service, right? So if somebody hires me to coach, there's an X amount of dollars that it costs per hour for me to coach somebody. When I am sitting down at my computer and I am sending meeting links and I'm sending people contracts and I am answering emails that I don't need to be answering, I'm actually costing that amount of money to my company. And I bet that that is way more than you'll ever be spending on hiring somebody to do those tasks for you. So you are that employee that is bleeding money into your company. I don't know about you, but I don't want that person to work for me. And a lot of times we are that person and we don't even realize because we are just like, oh, I'll just do that myself. It'll be faster if I do it. It would absolutely not. It will cost you more money than you will ever spend by hiring somebody to do that task where you could be putting your time and your effort into those high level achieving tasks that are actually bringing money into the business. So there is a money cost that you're not seeing because it's not coming directly out of your bank account, but it is costing you a lot of money. And there's that personal factor of everything that goes into causing that burnout.
100%. And honestly, what really put this into perspective for me, if it's helpful for anybody listening, is again, we always think our time is free. It's not free. And I see this happen all the time when people talk about profit margins, right? They never factor their labor cost into the cost of the production. And so their profit margins are always off by a large margin because of that. But what really helped me was my finance team actually, when they like broke down my P&L, they basically forced me in like the labor budget to account for my time because they basically said, look, Ellen, for this business to exist, if you were in this role, somebody would have to be in this role. So if you were to think about what it would cost you to replace yourself and the work that you do, we still have to measure it in the financial forecast, even if you're not actually paying yourself that amount. And so when we did it that way, that's when I really realized like, oh, would I ever feel comfortable paying someone the amount that I would have to pay them to replace me to do something as mundane as, XYZ? And that really flipped the perspective for me. So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody, but I just thought I would share that in tandem with what Nata's saying, because it really is such like a eye opener. And Nata, I feel like at the end of this episode, to wrap up our conversation, if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, like I hear you loud and clear, my business depends on me too much, I clearly need a change. Maybe they're considering those longer term solutions or investing in support like the CEO Confidential. But if you were to give them just one action item, just one first decision that they could make this week to help start making progress in the right direction, what would that be?
Say block a couple hours in your schedule and do that self-reflection that I talked about. Because if you just try to solve this problem with one more hire, one more system, one more program, you're going to try to build something on top of a foundation that's going to crumble. So take 2 hours and just sit quietly in a place where you can concentrate and think. Where am I being the bottleneck? Where am I being the ceiling of growth in my business? Where do I feel uncomfortable when I think about sharing this load with other people in my business? Maybe where did that come from, right? A lot of us became who we are because we were the kids that were like very mature for our age, and the adults counted on us to, get things done right, and you received praise for doing things right, and you're the go-to for being the problem solver. So we thrive, we like that, we feed from that. So where is that showing up in your business? And then make a decision of, okay, something needs to change, and it might be operational and it might not. So take the time to figure it out that first before you actually take a step to try to solve it.
I think that's such great advice because, I mean, and it's funny that you said the word foundation. The interview I had right before you, she brought that same thing up, but from like a totally different perspective. We were talking about like copywriting and messaging and whatnot, but without the right foundation, anything else you add on top of it can only be a temporary solution. So I think that's so wise to point people in that direction. Nata, where can people continue to connect with you, to learn more about the resources and support that you provide in this arena? And then again, a reminder, if you're interested in the CEO Confidential, that 2-day experience, make sure you get on the wait list in the show notes below.
Absolutely. You can find me at accidentalceo.co. Same thing for Instagram. I'm the one still answering all my DMs. That has not been delegated yet because I love connecting with people on a personal level. All my coaching at this time is one-on-one. So I'm very specific and I like to dive into what is it that you need and how can we help you in your business. So that's how you find me.
I love the honesty. You know, even a systems expert doesn't always delegate everything, but I think
Yeah.
that's such a great actually thought to end on is you find the things that you love, and for you that's connection, and you don't always have to delegate those things because it's what you want to hold on to rather than you feel obligated to hold on to. So anyways, that is so encouraging. Thank you, Nata, so much for your time today. As always, I love chatting with you. And then thank you all for listening in. Make sure you check out the show notes for all the resources, and we will catch you in next week's episode.
Thank you, Ellen.